Today we're going to be talking about integrating information from multiple texts. Our essential question is, how do I combine information from multiple sources to demonstrate my understanding of a topic? Here are some words that you're going to hear today and throughout the lesson this week that you'll need to know. First, the word integrate. That simply means to combine. So if we're integrating information, that means we're going to be combining information. Another word is analyze. When you analyze something, that means you examine it closely. You kind of take it apart, look at it in small pieces to get a really deep understanding of it. A similarity is something that is the same, and a difference is something that is different. So to get you thinking, I'm going to show you a couple pictures of some waves, and I want you to describe what a wave looks like based just on these pictures and not any prior knowledge that you might have. Here's the first picture. Here's picture number 2. And here's picture number 3. So based on those pictures, I want you to describe what does a wave look like based on those 3 pictures. Here's how you integrate information. First, you're going to read each passage or analyze each graphic. Remember, a graphic is a picture or a chart or a diagram, or basically anything that's not the main text. You're going to make some notes on what you learned, and then you're going to find similarities and differences. You're going to compile the information in your brain, so the things that are similar, you're going to combine them, you're going to integrate them, and you're going to think also, all right, what's different in the different passages or the graphics. And when you compile all the information from multiple sources to come to your own understanding, that's called synthesizing. So to demonstrate how you would integrate information and kind of synthesize the information, I'm going to model for you how you're going to take notes using this graphic organizer, using some pictures of the Loch Ness Monster. So the question is, what can you learn about the Loch Ness Monster from the pictures that you're going to see? And again, I'm going to model this for you. So here's the first picture. Just take a look at it. So we would look to see, okay, what do we notice about maybe the body, some of the features that are on the body, the Loch Ness Monster's head. And based on that picture, here are the notes that I took on my graphic organizer. The Loch Ness Monster in the picture you just saw had flippers. It also had horns. It had a long tail, and it was a fish-like tail at the end of it. It had a long neck, and it had an oval-shaped body. And notice where it said source, I just put picture 1 so I keep track of them. I'll show you that picture once more just so you can see the notes that I took. So we have flippers, had some horns, had a fish-like tail at the end of the long tail, the body's oval-shaped, has a long neck. Here's picture number 2. So already we can see there are some similarities, there are some differences. So here are the notes that I took on picture number 2. For picture 2, this one had teeth, there were no horns, there was a long tail and it was smooth, there was a long neck, flippers, and the body was oval shaped. And again, here's that picture so you can see the notes that I took. And I just put picture 2 for my source there. Here's the third picture. And here are my notes for the Loch Ness Monster using the third picture. So picture 3, this one had teeth, there were no horns, it had flippers, it had a long neck, there was a long tail, and this tail was forked at the end, meaning it was split, and the body was oval. Here's that picture again. So what I'm going to do now, based on the chart that I just took, I'm going to show it to you, and I want you to either turn and talk to your partner, or if you're doing this independently, just jot down some notes. What are some of the similarities and differences in the information that I took down or that I compiled? When you use a lot of information and make notes on it, you compile the information. So think, what's similar, what's different? What information can be discarded or ignored? So we want to look to see, based on all the notes I took, what could we conclude about the Loch Ness Monster? And anything that's not similar across all three, we kind of want to ignore that because we're not sure if that would be something we would want to include in a report about the Loch Ness Monster, since the information doesn't quite match up. So here's my chart with the information from all three pictures. So you want to integrate the information by looking to see, okay, what's the same that you could include in a report on the Loch Ness Monster? What is not the same across the three pictures that you might not want to include because you're not sure if it would be a good representation? I'm going to show you my notes for figuring out what's the same and what's different. Okay, so what I did was I color coded, and you can see red was all three pictures had the Loch Ness Monster having flippers. All three pictures had the Loch Ness Monster having a long tail, but notice I did not color code the type of tail that it had. All of them had a long tail, but the differences were at the end of the tail, so we would maybe not want to include that information since those were different. All three pictures, the Loch Ness Monster had a long neck, and in all three pictures, the Loch Ness Monster had an oval-shaped body. So the information that's in black on my chart is the information that I would maybe want to ignore or not include in a report because it's not common across all three pictures. Not all of the pictures had the Loch Ness Monster with horns, not all the pictures showed teeth, and then there were differences in the tail at the end. So if I were going to write a report on the Loch Ness Monster, I would just want to use the following information. The Loch Ness Monster has a long neck, a long tail, an oval-shaped body, and flippers. So I took all my information from the three sources, I combined it or integrated it, and then I could write a paragraph saying, here's what the Loch Ness Monster looks like based on those pictures. Now you're going to have a chance to try this with me. So as a class, what we're going to do is you're going to take some notes, and then we're going to share out as a class, and we're going to compile the notes together so we would have a set of class notes. And our question is, what can you learn about indentured servants from these passages? So I'm going to show you three passages that have some information about indentured servants. And you're going to take some notes on what you can learn about indentured servants from each passage. Here's the first one. This is just a passage that would be like something you would read in a social studies textbook or maybe an encyclopedia. It's just an informational paragraph. Follow along as I read this aloud to you. Early settlers in the American colonies had a lot of land but not enough people to work on it. So, beginning in the decade after the settlement at Jamestown, Virginia in 1607, many men and women came to the colonies to live as indentured servants. In exchange for their passage overseas and room and board, these men and women agreed to work for a period of between 4 and 7 years. Then they would be considered free. Until then, they had to fulfill their contracts by working very hard. Their lives were harsh and restricted. People who tried to run away could be punished by having their contracts extended. If they survived the hard labor, however, indentured servants received freedom packages which sometimes included at least 25 acres of land. On your notes page, over where it has source in the first box, just write indentured servants. That was the title of that paragraph. And then in the empty box next to it, you're going to write down some notes of what you learned about indentured servants based on that passage. And I'm going to flip back to that screen. So pause the screen, write down your notes, and then once you have your notes written, you can resume the video. And what we'll do is, after you have all of your notes for the three sources, we'll compile it as a class. Here's that screen again. Here's our second source. This is a primary source. That means that it is written, it is from that time period. It actually was written by someone who lived then. The first source we looked at was a secondary source, meaning it was someone else just writing about it. So this primary source is a letter that was written by a guy named Richard Frethorne, and he was an indentured servant, and this was written in Virginia in the year 1623. Loving and kind father and mother, there is nothing here to comfort me. Since I left the ship, all I have eaten is watery porridge and peas. There is not enough meat or poultry to be had. I haven't seen any deer around, and I am working too hard to hunt for fowl. Early until late I work and work, awarded for my labor with yet more porridge. 4 men have had to share a meager serving of bread, so it's little wonder that so many have fallen ill. Not only am I hungry, I hardly have any clothing. My cloak was even stolen by a man whom I believe sold it for food. Fortunately, Mr. Jackson in Jamestown is kind to me and has given me some fish, but I am still miserable and hungry. I want nothing more than to go home. I do beg you, good father, to release me from my great grief. I know you would cry if you saw my pathetic state. Give my love to all my friends and family. The answer to this letter will mean life or death for me. Please, Father, send for me as soon as possible. Richard. On your notes page, write letter for that source. And then again, you're going to write some notes in the box next to where you wrote letter on what can you learn about indentured servants based on the letter that you saw. So I'm going to flip back, pause it, and then resume the video once you have your notes. Here's our third source. This is also a primary document. This was taken from an ad that was in a newspaper, actually the Virginia Gazette Parks, from November 12th in 1736. And this ad was written by someone who owned an indentured servant. A white servant boy named John Turner, belonging to Mr. Darby Skinner of Hampton, was sent to Williamsburg and has not returned. It is suspected that he has run away. He had on a blue jacket and trousers, and had with him a small bay horse. Whoever will bring the boy and horse to Mr. Darby Skinner shall have a reasonable reward, over and above what the law allows. So for your third source, write down newspaper ad, and go back and jot down some notes. What can you learn about being an indentured servant, or just any facts about indentured servants from that letter? Pause the video and then resume once you have, or from the newspaper ad, once you have your notes written down. So here's the newspaper ad. Now that you have notes written for all 3 of those sources, you're going to integrate the information. You're going to connect the information in the 3 sources. So here's your question. What 3 pieces of information would you want to use if you were to write an essay or a paragraph about this topic, about the topic of indentured servants? You can find that on Schoology, where you're going to write your response to that question.